Hey everyone, and welcome to Two Steps Forward, where sustainability meets business reality. I'm Joel McCower here in Oakland, California, and joining me from an undisclosed location somewhere in England, it's Solitaire Townsend. Hello, Soli.
Hi, Joel. I'm actually down on the south coast of England, so by the sea for the summer. So I'm spending some time with family down here over summer. So I shall be working from this very little room, and you'll probably see me here until September.
I will look forward to seeing you wherever you are in the world and whatever your backdrop is. But I want to start off with a little news that you have. Three words: spheres of influence.
So this has been an extraordinary ride. So we've covered spheres of influence before on the podcast, where Oxford Net Zero and Futerra have been working on this idea, this concept. It's actually a really old concept. It's actually an idea that predates net zero itself, which is that companies have an influence beyond their own operations. Many years ago, I remember working with Chris Tuppen over at BT about this idea of avoided emissions and about how at BT, could we help our customers? And in fact, could we help the UK reduce its emissions? Because we, as a digital and communications company, that was possible. And it sort of got a bit sidelined when net zero came along. And lots of people talked about it, but it wasn't really part of the conversation. Although companies do so much of this work. They do so much beyond value chain mitigation. They do so much work of where their pensions are invested and where their money's invested. They do so much work of influence with government and with their customers. And they do so much work on their product, much of which has an impact far beyond Scope 3. So 2 years ago, we started working together, Futerra and Oxford University, on this concept of spheres of influence. Not reinventing the wheel, just creating some packaging around ideas that lots of other people had, like WBCSD was doing great work on avoided emissions. Influence Map was doing great work on policy work. And we just put it together into these three spheres. Sphere A being your product impact, sphere influence, sphere B being your portfolio of investments influence, and sphere C being your policy and public influence. We did a lot of work on how that might work and what the subspheres and the detail under it might be. And we started working with some amazing companies like Chanel and Unilever and Google and others. And then we've proposed it to ISO as part of their new ISO net zero standard, and it is currently been adopted into the new ISO standard in the consultation phase.
So what does that mean, and how should, first of all, what does that mean, the consultation phase, and then how should companies and sustainability professionals be thinking about this?
So it all came from the big realization that we get to net zero together or not at all. The idea of a company being perfectly net zero in a society that isn't is frankly ridiculous. And also one of the things which we're beginning to realize is that we really do get to net zero together or not at all. Lots of companies are staring down this quite scary 2030 and 2050 numbers going, I don't think we're going to do it if society doesn't actually match, if we don't get radical decarbonisation of grids. How are we ever going to hit our targets? And that's when we realized, look, companies are not isolated. No company is a castle. They're all codependent upon each other and upon society. So this idea of organizational net zero, so your organization trying to be net zero within the walls of the castle, and then global net zero, the fact that as a business you have a global influence far beyond the walls of your own business. And actually getting involved in global net zero will very much help you reach your organizational net zero targets. And for lots of companies, particularly those in the tech sector or the entertainment sector or in advertising, actually their influence on global net zero is much bigger than their organizational net zero. And so that's where the whole concept came from. And most companies are already doing loads on this already. None of it gets credited or celebrated. You're not able to claim any of it against your net zero. So it's all sort of extracurricular, all that kind of activity at the moment. We've bought it in-house. It's now part of net zero. The consultation for the International Standards Organization, Net Zero Standard, goes on for the next few weeks in the US, for slightly longer in other countries. You can get involved in it by looking for what your national chapter of ISO is, and you can go on and you can give your views on whether you think this is something that should stay in the standard or shouldn't stay in the standard. But we just from an idea conception to it being adopted by a standard over 2 years has been quite wide.
So real briefly, if what this means for a company that's trying to be certified under this soon to be ISO standard will need to demonstrate what exactly?
It would much the same as is the case in lots of other parts of net zero, which is you'll need to demonstrate that you're either taking action on those spheres or that you've decided not to. So just like much of the rest of the net zero standard, you need to have an explanation. And we've got a whole set of inside ISO. There's a whole set of guidance, but later this year in September, Futerra and Oxford Net Zero are going to be publishing a whole set of recommended and suggested KPIs that people can use. We've mapped a huge mapping exercise of those suggested KPIs against KPIs that already exist from WB6D and others. And so what we're looking for is to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, that almost everything we're putting forward in spheres are things that many companies are already doing already. We're just organising them in a properly organised way and making sure you can claim them and get credit for them, which up until recently you've not been able to do.
So I'll take a wild-ass guess here and predict that you'll be talking about this more at Solutions House at New York Climate Week.
Yeah. We'll be launching all the detailed guidance around this at Climate Week, and we'll be publishing all these suggested KPIs and showing how they already match a whole set of KPIs you're probably already using. But now these KPIs, which used to be extracurricular, you can bring them in-house and make them part of your net zero commitment.
Yeah. Well, what I like about this is a more systemic view of sustainability and I guess net zero as part of that, which brings me to a topic that's been on my mind a lot lately, and I want to talk about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and it has to do with our sustainability professionals just working at the wrong level, making incremental, relatively minor, and some not so minor tweaks. But in a capitalist system, that's probably not going to change in any meaningful time frame. Looking at the root, not looking at the root causes and the symptoms of those root causes. The root cause being shareholder primacy, and the symptoms of that being the financial short-termism, the incentive structures, and legal structures, all of which are outside the remit of a sustainability professional, or largely, at least most sustainability professionals. And so, are we making good time going in the wrong direction? Or maybe it's, making not very good time going in the right direction. I don't even know. And I think a lot of our peers, a lot of sustainability professionals are grappling with this right now and thinking about how do they cope in this system. So it's a lot to bite off in, a half an hour of conversation, but I think it's really important right now to be thinking about this stuff.
Particularly right now, when some of the giant architects of the current moment, particularly those in the big tech companies, are thinking beyond capitalism. They're putting forward the idea that with AI coming on board to replace and displace huge parts of the economy, perhaps there will need to be things like universal basic income, which are things which I wasn't expecting to be put forward by a whole load of rampant capitalists. But we're in a moment where we say the system isn't going to change. We're in this capitalistic system. I felt like that's the conversation that's been for most of my career. People putting forward, Kate Walworth and others putting forward alternative economic models, and we're going, yeah, you can't do it because capitalism's so locked in. For the first time in my career, for the first time since I understood what an economy was at all, it feels like there's a softening around the edges. Like AI is going to come along and is going to deeply disrupt the basis of a lot of the capitalistic model, which is the limits to growth being capital and labour. We already know that there's a third limit to growth, which is environmental resources, that were never calculated into the basics of economics. But the second one, the limit to growth being labour, is also now looks like it's going to be completely upended by AI. And so I'm beginning to feel like maybe there is a bit of a softening of the system isn't changeable. So going, well, climate change and AI feel like some system changing events on the horizon.
Yeah, but in the meantime, there's this day-to-day work that so many of our listeners are deeply engaged in, and there's this kind of this professionalism paradox for sustainability right now, where as it's become more of a career track, you've got KPIs and comp plans and quarterly reporting and all of that stuff. It's and the more it's structurally pulled towards what's measurable and defensible, it's not necessarily moving in the direction of what's actually needed, what's sufficient, what will get us where we where we need to go. As you said, we're either all going to get to net zero together, or we're not going to get there at all. And so the paradox is that without these, provable near term, short term wins, sustainability loses its budgets and its seats at the table. But those 2 small moves are, they're both a precondition, but they're also a recipe for not failure, but at least lack of success. Maybe that's mincing words there, so how do I guess that my question for you, Soli, is how do you work in that paradox of
Hmm.
having to have those short-term wins, but still making sure that you're keeping your eye on the prize?
Oh, I think we've all operated in that for all of our careers. We sit and we read these deep thinkers and listen to the podcasts like this one that challenge the very system with which we operate. And then we have to deliver our short-term goals and do the PowerPoint and get the Excel document and do the SBTI numbers tomorrow. And I think that's okay. That's what being a human being is. You can't operate at the systems level thinking every second of the day. Very few of us have the privilege of being able to do that. And I had a conversation once with quite a senior person who worked in mainstream business for most of their career and then had pivoted into sustainability. And we were having this breakfast where I was talking about how we could upend the system and we could transform. And he was like, no. He goes, I'm not here to transform everything. He goes, I just want to not feel guilty about what I do every day. It's like I just want to feel like I'm at least facing the right direction. That what I'm doing isn't making the world worse. And he goes, most of my career has been working in buying and advertising, and I felt like I was literally making the world worse. And now I might not be changing the system, but I'm not doing that anymore. And I think for a lot of people, that's actually how they feel. It's like they're not trying to radically transform the system; they're just trying not to make it worse. Some of us, maybe people who are listening to this podcast, are going, right, how can we re-engineer the entire system? And I think that the people who think that and have that conversation sometimes are lucky enough to be the people who are part of doing so. And I maybe it's because of being autistic. When I look around the system, when I look around capitalism, when I look around the embedded structures, when I look around the shareholder primacy, when I look around hedge fund, it all seems incredibly vulnerable and shallow to me. It doesn't feel embedded or difficult to change. It feels like it feels like sort of one of those Wild West movies where the front of the houses have all just got like bits of stick holding them up. That
Right.
there's a very, 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 very thin veneer of this is the system. And when you look through history and you realize how many different systems human beings have lived in, this one is just one of multiple different systems. And everybody throughout history who have lived in feudalism or lived in capitalism or lived in any of the other matriarchy even, have all thought that the system that they lived in was the inevitable, impossible to change, only way that human beings could ever live. So I don't do work that doesn't make the world worse and feel okay about it. Not everybody has to be out there trying to upend the world. And if you're the kind of person who does want to upend the world, believe that that's possible and get out there and try to do it, because thinking that nothing can change is the only way that nothing changes.
But you just described 2 ends of a bell curve. At one end
Mm,
is first do no harm, and the other end is change the system. But in the
mm.
big fat middle is where I think 90% of, or maybe 99%, I don't know, of sustainability professionals live, which is what I've long dubbed as random acts of greenness. Just doing, some product things, some process things, some employee things, some community things, and maybe some bold and audacious things, but there's still kind of a series of disconnected dots, and they don't necessarily all point in a certain direction of material transformation of a company and its markets. And again, that's not the remit sustainability professionals have. And so, given that, how do you operate in this random acts of greenness world, in this big fat middle of this bell curve? Um, and and I know this is something that you've been thinking a lot about, Soli, is how do we navigate, just emotionally and psychically,
Mm.
and this moment where we know, it's not just that we're, you know, probably not working at the level and the scale, scope, and speed that we need to, but we're also getting pushed back in so many ways, both inside our companies and in politically and in some cases society wide pushback. And so this is a really tough moment. But the question, I guess, is can this be an opportunity? Can this be a pivotal moment for the profession where out of this chaos, this frustration, this incredibly hard work that everybody's doing, that, you know, late at night, lying on the pillow, not yet asleep, knowing in your heart of hearts that it's probably not enough. How does this become an opportunity, Solely?
So I, I think that you're spot on. I think that's how everybody feels all the time, particularly at that kind of like waking up about an hour before you're supposed to wake up, like with your brain racing with all the ideas of all the things which I should be doing rather than this thing, and then having to get up and do your diary. It's okay.
One
Yeah, but I
hour
should be
wouldn't
doing
be
this
so
and do that.
bad.
Yeah,
It's the 3 hours before I'm
it's the
supposed to wake up
3 a.m. ones.
that's tough. Yeah, yeah.
So one is welcome to being a human being. Like this is how human
Mm.
beings have always felt, and that sense of I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing the right things. Could someone just tell me what the thing is that I should be doing? Could someone from the future come back and say, hey, you actually want to guarantee that your life has been worth it and you've made a difference, do this one thing. And that's not going to happen. And we have absolutely no. I often think that all my efforts, all the books I've written, the speeches I've given, the strategies I've written, the grand communications messages I've put out there, the billions of people that I've helped to reach through some of the things which I've done, none of it will probably be as important as like 1 5-minute chat I had with some young person at a conference,
Mm.
and that changed their mind about something, and then they went and made the difference. And it's like none of us will never ever ever have that objective view about whether we were able to make a difference or not. None of us will ever get it. And in future generations, this generation and what we did here will be interpreted multiple different ways. Sometimes we'll be interpreted as having been the ones who saved things. Sometimes we'll be interpreted as being the ones who fucked everything up. But like, there's absolutely no way to guarantee that the thing that you're doing is the right thing. So that's number one, give up on thinking, on working out what the right thing to do is. And just number two, do things. So there's a theory called narrative identity. So narrative identity says that one of the best ways to think about your life is as part of a story, almost to sort of step outside of yourself and to think about if your life was a movie or if your life was a story, and to put it into storytelling framework. So a narrative identity would be probably right now in terms of the hero's journey, which is the very kind of very familiar, very often repeated, Odyssey does it, Star Trek does it, a way in which lives pan out. We're at what's called the cave, which would be where things get really bad and you don't feel like you're making a difference. In fact, you feel like you failed. And the cave is a test. The cave is, will you give up? Basically, can that sense of overwhelm and ineffectiveness and imposter syndrome and self-doubt take you from your path? The sirens try to do it in Odyssey. He go in Star Wars. He goes into the cave and has to face his father, etc. So it happens a lot in storytelling. And the only way to fail that test, is to give up. That's it. That's the only failure of the test, is to give up. Anything you continue to do, whether you think it's the right thing or the wrong thing, is the way to pass the test. And that's what we're facing at the moment. So You might be reading about transforming capitalism and replacing it with different systems. You might be reading about the fact that our energy system and entropy means that we've got to radically transform. You might be reading about climate effects, and these big concepts in the evenings, and then during the day filling in forms from investors or doing your reporting and wondering whether this is the right thing to do. And again, the only failure is to stop. And we should all reflect on doing the right thing and trying to transform the system. But opting out is the only way to not transform anything.
I agree that, doing nothing is not an option, and that is the only route to failure. But those hero's journeys that you described are all personal journeys where somebody is threatened, somebody is under attack, has a dilemma. And while that's true for all of us in sustainability, we all have these personal dilemmas. We're up against this incredible system of which we are a tiny, tiny, teensy weeny bits of sand on the beach, and we can't individually. And the question is, can we even collectively transform that system in a way that eliminates the threat that will allow us to, have a happy ending, if there is ever an ending to this story, which there won't, of course, be in any foreseeable time frame. So that feels like a different thing. I love the storytelling analogy. I love the narrative identity and picturing yourself in the story as the hero, as on a journey. But it just feels it feels a little too simplistic for this particular topic, because we have these global challenges. We have nature we're battling politics, we're battling finance, we're battling the shareholder primacy system. We're battling so many things at once, and it's not just us, it's everybody's battling. And so we have this, unless the hero is all of us, I'm still trying to understand, and just doing something. I bet that most people listening will say, "Yeah, okay, I've got this. I'm doing something. I'm not doing nothing. I'm, making some changes here and there, and we've moved from, you know, X to, half of X or twice X, depending on what the metric is. And so I'm doing something, but it still doesn't answer that question of are we really moving fast enough in the right direction, and how does a sustainability professional do I think about that, and what, if anything, should I be doing differently?
With that, what should I be doing differently is the interesting question, because the rest of it sounds all like really egotistical. It's like, am I doing enough? It's like, that's why I say just keep doing good things, because otherwise what you're doing is you're expecting the world to validate you. You're expecting climate change, parts per million carbon dioxide to come down because of your efforts. You're expecting equity to happen because of the system that you're doing. It's like that feels kind of egotistical to go. It feels like looking at the problem from the wrong way. So rather than going, how do I serve? It's going, how I feel bad because the world isn't changing quickly enough to meet my sense of my sense of needing to be validated by these things. And I think that none of us are going to get the validation. Like if you look at the projections, some of the projections which are going to be coming out in September, which are fascinating, and I've seen a little bit of from the IPCC, there is projections around, particularly with one of the things which we've done brilliantly on, which is renewable energy, and we should, as a community, take a huge sense of pride in the contribution we've made as business, as sustainability leaders, to helping to validate, normalize, build the structure for, incentivize renewable energy. Like you're like me. You remember back when that was literally laughable. Renewables were a joke,
Sure.
and we've managed to actually get them to an when you think about the amount of renewables which have been deployed around the world, it's unbelievable. And if we think about the best case scenario on some of these topics, and there is a best case scenario, there's even cases where you've got climate recovery being possible. None of it happens in you and my lifetime. We will get zero validation. Even if this system does solve itself over time, even if we do get back to, after going through some very serious times, even if we do get back to a place where nature is beginning to regenerate, where we're back in a stable climate, when we do have less societal division, we're unlikely to see that. We'll work our entire careers, you and I, for a world we don't get to live in, because that's how social change happens. And that's okay, because that's how every change community has had before. Most of the suffragettes never got to vote. Most of the leaders of the civil rights movement never got to see the first black president. You do this work not for that external validation of, am I doing the right thing? You do this work because it's the right thing to do, which is where perhaps the most dangerous conversation we could bring into this is morality. It's
Mm.
not about, am I tactically, structurally doing the right thing? Am I going to get the validation for doing this and feeling that I've made a difference? Probably not. So why do you keep doing it? You keep doing it because it's the right thing to do, even if you're not sure whether it is the rightest of the right things to do. And then you also keep your mind open, and when you do see opportunities for some very big structural change, which I think is going to be a huge opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years with some of the social change we're going to see driven by AI and by climate, then you don't block it or keep doing the same thing. You harness that. I'm not expecting anyone, including you and I, to be the ones who make that transformation. I do expect us to be open to it and to get on board with it when it starts to come.
Yeah, I think the analogy that I'm thinking of as you're talking is just driving. Driving on a journey, you're clearly looking at the road right in front of you, and the next turn, the next exit, the next signal. But you're also looking at the destination of where you're headed, and you're also probably, unless you're absolutely on a mission and you have a little bit of time, you're open to what comes on along the way and what opportunities you see. Like, oh, there's a restaurant. Oh, I need, there's a park. I want to take a walk. And so there's be heading in a direction with a goal, being obviously highly cognizant of what's in front of you, and thinking about what opportunities come along the way is how this happens. And I love the renewable energy metaphor, in part because it's the only really truly good story that we in sustainability have to tell about some system that is, as we speak, being transformed, where
Mm,
renewable energy is overwhelmingly the biggest form of new energy production in around the world, in the United States, everywhere, even despite the kneecapping of subsidies and regulations and the tearing down of wind turbines and all of the things that is happening here in the United States. Um, I remember working on research projects in, the turn of the millennium, so about 25 plus years ago. And I remember saying, if we could get solar to $1 a watt, wow, I mean, that would
yeah,
just be a transformation. And we were like, oh my God, how could we possibly ever do that? It's now about 30 cents a watt. And
yeah.
we've blown through those pipe dreams, those golden rings that we were trying to grab, and brass rings, I guess, whatever they were. And we found our way there. Yes, it's been a quarter century. Yes, we don't have a lot of time to, tinker around with the rest of the challenges we face, but that does speak to a vision, looking at what's the next thing we have to do on that vision, being open to new technologies or new materials or other things. Again, I'm speaking of solar, that make solar more both cheaper and higher efficiency, um, and that's how we've gotten to this point. Um, eh, and we'd get there a lot faster, yes, if the policy supported it, if the subsidies to renewable to fossil energy were to reduce or even go away. But that's been and still is the hero's journey that we've been on that
Exactly.
particular aspect of sustainability.
And to loop it back to things like spheres and what have you, things such as companies making advanced market commitments on
Mm.
renewable purchases, et plus, which is like esoteric kind of stuff that in sustainability we talk to each other about, but perhaps the outside world doesn't know much. That's driven that market hugely, absolutely transformed that market. Those kind of commitments that we make, the commitments around, scope 1 and scope 2, these are huge, huge, huge commitments. The commitments about purchasing Rex. It's like it's it's detailed, difficult, commitment-led negotiations internally, money, step by step, the kind of stuff that actually is the next step on the road of going, oh, can we negotiate a partnership? Can we get a set of rec commitment? Can we get an advanced market commitment? That sort of stuff, which can take months, if not years, to get okayed in one company and can feel kind of small in the greater scheme of things. That's how we made that change. That's how we did it. And that's how we transformed, and what energy system human beings use, be it charcoal, be it coal, be it whale oil, be it nuclear, be it renewables, is fundamental to how our entire societies work. It's fundamental to whether we're living in centralized societies where one person can flick the energy on or flick the energy off, whether our systems are resilient, whether you have the power in your own home or whether the power comes down to you. These things actually do. There's a whole system around them that changes, which, we're now living in. And I'm astonished how quickly that came. Like, I actually think, again, it's happened in one lifetime. When I was growing up, I was living in a council house which had not yet been upgraded to central heating. So we had a coal power. We had a little coal grate where we'd burn in the evenings, and we had a ray burn. A ray burn is one of those ovens which you actually have to put wood in. It also has, Soli's 18th century childhood, but that's what I grew up in, and I'm not that old.
And council house, for our American listeners, or basically government housing, in effect, subsidized housing. So they're what we
pretty basic, yeah. And now I live in a house with solar panels. So in one lifetime, I'm again pointing out, I'm not even that old. In one lifetime, I've gone from being coal powered through sort of pretty standard electricity, probably still quite a lot of coal, but at least coming down into radiators, to now being in a renewably powered home. There's very few human beings who have ever lived through that kind of transformation in their own lifetime. To spend 18 years living in a house that was coal powered, to then having hopefully the middle part of their life in an entirely different energy system.
You're barely halfway there, Soli.
Yeah, thank you. I had to stop myself then. That sounded very... But it's extraordinary, the speed that's happened.
Well, and I think what's interesting is to look back and say, well, how did that change happen? And going back to the work I did 25 or so years ago on what would it take for solar to become cheap, ubiquitous, and dominant. There were basically sort of we created a 3x3 matrix. I know this is going to be like eye rolling kind of stuff, but I do think it's really important that on one axis there's standardization, there's education and market aggregation, and across the other axis is technology, policy, and finance. So think about, technology needs to be standardized, regulations need to be standardized. We need to aggregate those standards, need to aggregate the technologies in order to get the economies of scale. And if you fill out those 9 boxes that result from that 3x3 grid: technology, policy, and markets or finance, education, standardization, and aggregation, you kind of create a recipe. Those 9 boxes sort of become, not maybe only 4 or 5 of those are relevant at any one time, but become the roadmap for how you transform. Now, that's for a technology. It may be different for a product or a market. I don't know. I haven't really played it out. But understanding what it takes to transform at this one foot in front of the other, step by step, long view, maybe it's 20 or 25 years, again, the things we may not live to see. That's, I think, an important part of this process for whatever you do, wherever you are in the system, of understanding those components or other components that may be different than the ones that I've named. So I think breaking it down, asking the big questions, what would it take to change this system? The point that I guess this is about Soli, at least that I'm coming to here, is that you can be putting one foot in front of the other. You can be driving down the road, looking at every sign and turn, but having a map, having a sense of direction, direction of travel, as they say, understanding what it will take to transform that system at the macro level, even if you're only one small part of it, can really, I think, be helpful, hopeful, optimistic, and inspiring, and hopefully motivating as well.
Yeah. And I think, you know, when you're in it, when you're in that system change, what you're doing is what we used to do is like a lot of Excel documents, a lot of PowerPoints, a lot of socializing, a lot of redoing the numbers over and over and over again until you convince the 3 people who were in the company at that time to say yes and sign up to something. It can feel very, very prosaic. Like, actually, I think we expect system change to feel like a narrative identity. We expect it to feel very exciting and very big, whereas actually quite a lot of the time, system change is just putting one foot in front of the other, and it doesn't validate you and make you feel like you've done a big thing until you're far, far, far further down the line. And then maybe if you're lucky, as we have been with the renewables transformation, you can look back down the line and go, whoa, that was big. But it didn't always feel big in every step of the way. So that would be the thing which I say is that, yes, it's great to have a map. But even if you don't have a map, you still have to keep swimming.
Yeah, and understanding the line between pragmatic incrementalism, which buys time for bigger change, and incrementalism that's actually just a cover for business as usual. I think that's, again, in the still of night, that I think a lot of people have to grapple with. Um, and how does what I'm doing as a sustainability professional, what difference is it actually making? I think that's just a really plain, blunt, difficult question that probably not enough of us are asking. I ask it, and sometimes the answer is kind of depressing. And I agree with you, Soli, that person to person, those conversations, those mentoring relationships I have with a lot of young emerging professionals, with my teammates at Green Biz Trellis, at people who I just meet out in the field and who come back and ask my thoughts on things, and you later learn maybe you made a difference. Those are big wins personally for me. Now, I'm not a sustainability professional in a big company, so I have a different remit. But figuring out what powers you, what motivates you, what is worth waking up for, and how that maps to what actually needs to happen is just at least a good thought exercise.
And I think most people do that thought exercise. And I think it's a bit like being a parent. When a parent thinks a lot about, oh God, am I a good parent? Am I not a good parent? Oh, I think I'm a terrible parent. Usually it's a sign you're a good parent. The bad parents are the one who just think that they're great all the time. The parents who like eat themselves up about whether they're a good parent or not tend to be good parents. So if you're the sustainability professional that eats themselves up about whether you're making a difference or not, chances are you probably have got enough self-reflection that you're doing the things that you should do. So that I wouldn't feel it as depressing. I'd feel it as being like a really important part of being good at your job is eating yourself up about whether you're good at your job, because that means you're open to being better at it. And over the next couple of years, we're all going to have to be ready to pivot, take new things on, challenge ourselves, put things down, pick things up. So as long as you're feeling that like, oh God, I don't think I'm good enough, I don't think this is working, everything's crap, then you're probably in the right mindset to make a difference.
Well, Soli, as usual, talking to you makes me feel better about so many things, and it's a great way. We're talking on a Monday. It's a great way to start the week. So thank you for that, and we're gonna leave it there. And thank all of you for hanging in with us and listening to our conversation about these challenging moments, that hopefully you're having some inspiration and hopefulness as well. Um, Two Steps Forward is available wherever you get your podcast. Please subscribe or follow us. You can also go to twostepsforwardpodcast.com to get some previous episodes, you can also send us a note there, a suggestion, an idea, a thought, some feedback, some pushback, whatever you got, please. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to Trellis Briefing, the daily newsletter from Trellis Group. Just go to trellis.net to sign up. And of course, to Soli's regular musings on Substack. Thank you, Soli. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time.